84%. I mean, just think about that number for a second. 84% of the people say their ultimate American dream isn't, a bigger house or a fancy car or even early retirement.
Right. It's totally shifted.
Yeah, it is simply having zero debt. Welcome to a brand new deep dive on the Generational Wealth Project. If you're, navigating the realities of modern finance, make sure to like and subscribe to the Generational Wealth Project so you never miss these wealth-building deep dives.
It's an essential topic today.
It really is. We are unpacking data today that fundamentally changes how we understand success as a culture.
Absolutely.
The fact that 84% of people place living debt-free on the exact same podium as raising a family or having quality health care, it tells me that the cultural definition of the American dream has undergone this massive mutation.
A complete paradigm shift, yeah.
Right. We've gone from dreaming about what we can acquire to dreaming about what we can escape.
Well, and the psychology underlying that 84% metric reveals an even starker reality, honestly.
Oh, totally.
Because when you dig into the crosstabs of this research, 68% of respondents take it a step further. They believe that being debt-free is an absolute non-negotiable requirement to be considered wealthy.
Wait, really? Like non-negotiable?
Completely non-negotiable. If you hold a mortgage or, say, a car loan, nearly 7 out of 10 people will look at your balance sheet and decide you cannot be wealthy. And that is regardless of how much income you generate or how many assets you hold.
That is wild.
Yeah, we are witnessing a transition where wealth is no longer defined by abundance. It's defined by negative space.
Negative space. I like that.
Right. It's literally the absence of a specific liability.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because it's defining freedom not by how far you can run, but by the fact that there's no chain around your ankle.
That's a great way to put it.
And that completely upends the traditional financial playbook. But before we get into the tactical escape routes to reach this modern American dream, we really need to dismantle the idea that all chains are created equal.
Yes, please. This is so important.
Because the data we're looking at shows people treating all debt as a universal evil, right? Like a pathogen they just need to eradicate immediately.
Right.
But that binary thinking, like debt is bad, cash is good, it completely ignores the mechanics of how capital actually works in the real world.
It does. Treating all debt as a universal evil is, well, it's a cognitive distortion.
A distortion that actively paralyzes wealth creation, I'd say.
Exactly. We have to separate the financial tools from the financial traps. The distinction between good debt and bad debt isn't a moral judgment at all.
It's just math.
Right. It's a mathematical calculation based on the velocity of money and return on investment. So good debt is essentially a strategic lever.
Okay, break that down for the listener.
Sure. You take on a financial obligation because the asset you are acquiring has a high, calculable probability of yielding a positive return. A return that outpaces the cost of the borrowing.
So you're basically buying time.
Time or potential, yeah.
Right, so I look at the classic examples. Mortgages, student loans, business capital. Like, if I take out a business loan at 7%, but I use that capital to buy inventory that yields a 20% profit margin.
You're winning.
Exactly. I am mathematically wealthier because I use someone else's money to bridge the gap.
Precisely. The asset's value exceeds the cost of the debt. It's leverage.
And here is where I think people get stuck. I think the cultural anxiety stems from the fact that we've been sold a heavily sanitized version of good debt.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we are told to go to college, take out the loans, and it will automatically pay off.
Like it's a guarantee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's look at the student loan scenario. I borrow heavily for a specialized degree,
Right.
but by the time I graduate, the macroeconomic environment shifts, an entire industry gets disrupted by technology, and boom, the high-paying job doesn't exist.
It happens all the time.
My so-called good debt just permanently morphed into an inescapable anchor.
Right.
It's kind of like buying a state-of-the-art million-dollar tractor for a farm where the climate suddenly shifts and it never rains.
That is, wow, that tractor analogy perfectly illustrates the hidden variable in every financial equation.
Which is?
Risk premium.
Right.
The label of good debt is fundamentally flawed because it implies a guarantee. And, there are no guarantees.
Never.
There are only historical averages and probabilistic outcomes. The investment in human capital, like a degree or a piece of real estate is based on an assumption of normal market conditions.
Right. When you take on debt for a mortgage, you assume the housing market won't collapse the way it did in 2008.
Exactly. Or when you take out a student loan, you assume wage growth will naturally outpace inflation.
Yeah.
Debt requires you to be an active risk manager.
Which is terrifying for most people.
It is, because good debt becomes bad debt the moment the underlying asset's earning potential drops below the annualized cost of the loan.
So the debt instrument itself doesn't change.
No, the structural reality around it does.
Which means the burden of critical thinking rests entirely on the borrower. We can't just rely on societal stamps of approval anymore.
No, you have to run the risk-to-reward ratio yourself.
And that sits in stark contrast to bad debt, where the math is undeniably toxic from day one.
Oh, bad debt is mathematically indefensible.
Period.
It is a liability that actively drains your net worth without offering any compounding value or future income.
So we're talking about things like
Financing depreciating assets. Things that lose value the second you acquire them, like a new car rolling off the lot. Or using high-interest credit cards to float everyday consumables.
right, paying for groceries with a credit card you can't pay off.
Exactly. When you finance a vacation or a luxury good at a 20% annual percentage rate, the interest compounds with a velocity that vastly exceeds any value you derive from the purchase.
You are paying a massive premium for an asset that has a terminal value of 0.
It's bailing water into a sinking boat.
Yeah. And this anxiety about whether the rain will fall on the farm, whether the debt will actually perform as a tool or drag you down as a trap, it's fracturing how different demographics approach their finances.
The generational divide here is huge.
It really is.
Yeah.
When you look at the data outlining this 84% who want to be debt-free, there is a massive confidence gap between generations.
Yes.
Older demographics generally feel this is an achievable milestone, but younger demographics share the exact same dream and view it as almost mathematically impossible.
Well, the structural starting lines are entirely different.
How so?
Younger demographics are entering the economy with a foundational disadvantage. They are carrying unprecedented levels of non-dischargeable student loan debt into a macroeconomic environment characterized by aggressive inflation.
And housing costs.
Yes, housing costs that have vastly outpaced median wage growth. So the summit of the debt-free mountain isn't just higher.
The gravity pulling them down is stronger.
Exactly. But the most revealing data point in this generational divide isn't about their optimism.
Right. It's about their proposed methodology for solving the problem.
I found this part of the data completely fascinating. The generations are staring at the exact same obstacle, but their blueprints for dismantling it are totally opposed.
Completely different paradigm.
Yeah. Younger people overwhelmingly believe the path to a debt-free life requires mastering personal finance skills themselves.
DIY finance.
Right. They view it as a mandate to become their own CFO. They need to master the budgeting algorithms, decipher index funds, hack their own behavior.
And the older generations.
They look at the same problem and their default solution is external. They believe the key to financial success is acquiring the capital to hire professional financial advice.
And that divergence is a direct reflection of the informational eras in which these groups formulated their financial worldviews.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because older demographics matured in an economy of financial gatekeeping.
Ah, right. You couldn't just open an app. No, access to the markets, to complex financial modeling, or even to basic compound interest projections required an intermediary. You needed a broker or an advisor.
Success was defined by having enough assets to warrant a seat across the desk from a professional.
Exactly. The expertise was externalized.
Yeah.
Younger demographics, however, are products of total financial democratization.
Right. They have algorithmic budgeting software, micro-investing platforms, and just an endless stream of financial analysis available on a device in their pocket 24 hours a day.
Which changes everything about how you approach a problem.
It reminds me of how we treat cars now versus 40 years ago.
Oh, how so?
Well, the older generation believes that if your engine is knocking, the goal is to make enough money to hire a world-class, trustworthy mechanic to fix it.
Right.
The younger generation feels they're required to watch 70 hours of instructional video, buy the specialized tools, and rebuild the transmission in their own driveway just to survive the commute.
That mechanic analogy highlights the specific burden of the information age so perfectly.
It's a heavy burden,
Yeah,
honestly.
it is. Democratization of data was supposed to be liberating, but it has inadvertently created a profound cognitive overload.
Yeah, too much information.
When the cultural expectation shifts toward a DIY financial model, the pressure becomes entirely internalized. If your portfolio underperforms, or if you struggle to optimize your debt repayment,
It's just your fault.
exactly, it no longer feels like a systemic issue or bad advice from a broker. It feels like a personal intellectual failure.
Because you had all the data, the apps, the deep dives, and you still failed.
And that breeds a very specific type of financial paralysis.
It's decision fatigue on a massive scale.
Definitely.
If you are already stressed about the structural weight of the debt you carry, and then you have to parse through conflicting strategies from a dozen different financial influencers telling you to optimize your micro habits.
Your brain just shuts down.
Totally. The sheer volume of tactical advice becomes its own barrier to entry.
It does.
But, here's the great equalizer in this data. Whether you are trying to rebuild the engine yourself using an app, or you are paying a professional mechanic a 1% management fee, the actual physics of the obstacle course do not change.
No. The hurdles to debt repayment are identical across the board.
So let's talk about those hurdles.
Well, the mechanics of escaping debt are universally unforgiving because they exploit human behavioral weaknesses while simultaneously applying mathematical pressure.
A brutal combination.
Truly. The sources outline 4 primary hurdles, and the first is the velocity of compounding interest.
The silent killer.
High interest rates, particularly on unsecured consumer debt like credit cards, create a mathematical undertow. When you are paying 20 or 24% interest, your minimum monthly payment is largely just servicing the cost of the borrow.
Right, the principal balance remains almost static. You're trying to run up a down escalator that is accelerating.
Exactly.
You put in the physical effort, you sacrifice your cash flow, and at the end of the month, the statement shows you move forward by 2 inches.
And the psychological devastation of that is immense.
Oh, it crushes you.
If the math tells you that your sacrifice yields no visible progress, the human brain logically concludes that the effort is pointless.
Why even try?
Right, which leads directly into the second hurdle, the lack of a formalized budget.
The dreaded B word.
Yes. Operating without a budget while attempting to pay down debt is akin to attempting to drain a pool without knowing where the water is flowing in.
It's just guessing.
A budget is frequently misunderstood as an instrument of restriction. In reality, it is a diagnostic tool for visibility.
I love that framing. A diagnostic tool.
Right. It forces an individual to confront their actual consumption patterns versus their perceived consumption patterns. Without that diagnostic clarity, it is impossible to identify the margins.
The margins being the extra cash.
Exactly. The specific areas of cash flow that can be reallocated to attack the principal balance of the debt.
I hear people say all the time, I track my spending in my head, I know what I buy.
Everyone says that.
But the brain is designed to lie to us, to protect our egos. We categorize that third coffee of the week as an exception rather than a rule.
Yes, the mind plays tricks.
A budget removes the ego. But even when you have the map, you still have to navigate the terrain. Which brings us to the third hurdle. Discipline and behavioral relapse.
This is a huge one.
The data highlights how easily people fall back into impulse spending. And I think we need to look at the neuroscience of this.
Okay, let's do it.
When you are aggressively paying down debt, you are existing in a state of continuous deprivation. You are denying yourself the dopamine hits of novel purchases, and eventually cognitive fatigue sets in.
The behavioral fatigue is a documented phenomenon. Willpower is not an infinite resource.
It's highly exhaustible.
Very. When an individual is operating under the chronic stress of financial limitation, their capacity for executive function diminishes over time. A single stressful day can deplete the cognitive reserves necessary to maintain the budget.
Leading to an impulsive purchase.
Exactly. The justification usually manifests as, I have been so disciplined, I deserve a reward.
Just one little treat.
Right. But that single micro moment of compromised discipline can unravel weeks of mathematical progress.
Which then triggers a shame spiral that further discourages the overarching goal.
Yes. The shame is what really derails people.
And just when you think you've mastered the budget and hacked your own dopamine receptors, the fourth hurdle appears.
The unpredictable macroeconomic reality of emergencies.
Life happens.
A transmission fails, a medical deductible comes due, a roof leaks. When you are pouring every available dollar into aggressive debt repayment, you often lack liquidity.
So you have no cash buffer.
Exactly. An unforeseen expense acts as an immediate structural shock, forcing you to utilize the exact credit cards you just paid off. The loop restarts.
It's so defeating.
And what is particularly crucial to analyze here is that these four hurdles, interest rates, budgeting, discipline, and emergencies, they are frequently framed as individual failings.
Like it's a character flaw.
Right. If you have debt, society implies you are bad at math or lack self-control or failed to plan. However, a deeper analysis of the provided materials requires us to pivot from personal pathology to macroeconomic design.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
We have to examine the architecture of the environment. The system is fundamentally constructed to make becoming debt-free an act of immense friction.
This is the realization that changes the entire paradigm for the listener.
It really does.
We are not just fighting our own internal desires for a new pair of shoes. We are fighting an ecosystem that relies on our indebtedness. We live in a highly normalized debt culture.
Highly normalized.
Think about how the friction of borrowing has been systematically eradicated. It used to be that you had to go to a bank, speak to a loan officer, and justify a borrow.
It took effort.
Now, the point of sale is integrated with microfinancing. Buy now. Pay later algorithms are embedded into the checkout of a $50 t-shirt.
It's everywhere.
The economy expects you to finance your lifestyle.
It is the financialization of daily life. The societal expectation has shifted from purchasing what you can afford with liquid capital to purchasing what you can cash flow on a monthly basis.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. This creates profound, invisible pressure to maintain a standard of living that is artificially inflated by credit. And this cultural normalization is underpinned by central banking mechanics.
Okay, let's go macro.
When federal debt rises or inflationary pressures mount, the systemic response involves adjusting monetary policy, specifically raising benchmark interest rates.
Let's break down exactly how that macro weather hits the listener's wallet. Because I think people hear Federal Reserve and they just tune out, thinking it only affects Wall Street.
Right, but it is a direct transmission mechanism. When a central bank raises its benchmark rate, the cost for commercial banks to borrow money increases.
Makes sense.
To maintain their profit margins, those commercial banks immediately pass that increased cost onto the consumer by raising the prime rate.
Which affects everyone.
Exactly. If you hold a credit card, a variable rate auto loan, or an adjustable rate mortgage, your interest rate is intrinsically tethered to that prime rate.
Wow.
Therefore, a policy decision made in a boardroom to cool macroeconomic inflation directly and automatically increases the daily interest compounding on your personal credit card balance.
The machinery of the broader economy actively makes your personal debt harder to extinguish.
You are fighting a system that mathematically requires you to consume and punishes you when the macrometrics get out of balance.
It's wild. Realizing the game is structurally rigged to keep you on the treadmill is, well, it's the prerequisite for stepping off it.
It's step one.
Once you understand those external forces, you can employ the tactical escape routes. The sources lay out the architectural blueprints for breaking this cycle, specifically focusing on the debt avalanche and the debt snowball methods.
These are the two preeminent structured algorithms for debt elimination.
Let's start with the avalanche.
So the debt avalanche is the academically optimal approach. The methodology requires you to inventory every liability and sort them strictly by the annual percentage rate, from highest to lowest.
Ignoring the actual balance.
Correct. You fulfill the minimum payment obligations on every account, and you deploy all surplus capital exclusively toward the balance with the highest interest rate.
So you just hammer that top rate.
Yes. Once that is eliminated, you move the entire payment block to the debt with the next highest rate.
It's the spreadsheet winner. By attacking the highest interest rate, you are stopping the most aggressive compounding.
Mathematically, yes.
You minimize the total amount of capital lost to interest over the life cycle of the debt. It is the fastest, cheapest way out.
In theory.
But I have a theory on why the avalanche method so frequently fails in practice, despite being mathematically flawless.
Oh, let's hear it.
It ignores human neurobiology.
Ah, yes.
If my highest interest rate is a massive $30,000 credit card balance, and my surplus capital is $200 a month,
That's a long road.
I am going to be attacking that single mountain for years before I get the satisfaction of crossing it off the list. The human brain cannot defer gratification for 3 years while experiencing constant financial deprivation.
It's exhausting.
The spreadsheet is right, but the human operating the spreadsheet burns out.
Your hypothesis aligns perfectly with behavioral economics, actually, which is precisely why The alternative strategy, the debt snowball, is often more successful for the median consumer.
How does the snowball flip that script?
The snowball method requires a complete disregard for the interest rates. You inventory the liabilities by total balance, from smallest to largest,
Okay.
and you attack the smallest nominal balance first. Mathematically, this is inefficient. You will ultimately pay more total interest over time.
But neurologically, it's a masterpiece.
Precisely. It is engineered to manufacture dopaminergic responses. By targeting a small balance, you achieve a total elimination of an account in a matter of months, perhaps even weeks.
A quick win.
Yes. That quick win provides a tangible, verifiable marker of progress. It releases dopamine, which reinforces the behavior that led to the reward.
So you get hooked on paying off debt.
Exactly. You take the capital that was servicing the small debt, combine it with your surplus, and attack the next smallest balance. You are building psychological momentum.
That makes total sense.
By the time you reach the larger, high-interest balances that the avalanche would have targeted first, your financial discipline is no longer a conscious struggle. It has been solidified into a habit.
It acknowledges that we are emotional creatures, not calculators. If paying a few hundred extra dollars in interest over 2 years is the psychological tax required to actually keep you in the game.
It is a tax worth paying.
Completely. Now, the sources also discuss debt consolidation. And I see this marketed constantly, these companies promising to roll all your high-interest cards into one low monthly payment.
It sounds like a magic bullet.
It really does, is it?
Consolidation is a structural tool, but it is frequently misrepresented as a cure. The mechanism involves securing a new line of credit, typically a personal loan or a balance transfer credit card with an introductory 0% yield, and using that new capital to instantly pay off multiple high-interest revolving accounts.
So what's the advantage?
The advantage is twofold. It simplifies your cognitive load by reducing multiple deadlines into a single monthly payment, and it drastically reduces the velocity of the interest compounding against you.
So it acts as a tourniquet. It stops the bleeding so you can actually perform surgery on the principal.
Yes, but a tourniquet left on too long without addressing the underlying wound will result in the loss of the limb.
Ouch.
The danger of consolidation lies in the illusion of progress. Your credit card balances suddenly read 0, which can induce a false sense of financial security.
Like you suddenly have all this room on your cards.
Exactly. If the underlying behavioral patterns, the lack of budgeting, the impulse spending have not been corrected, the consumer will simply begin utilizing those newly zeroed credit cards again.
That is terrifying.
It happens all the time. Within a year, they are servicing the new consolidation loan and a new mountain of high-interest revolving debt. It doubles the exposure.
Which brings us right back to the necessity of the daily grind, the budget.
Always back to the budget.
The sources highlight a very specific, widely adopted framework to manage this process without losing your mind.
Yeah.
The 50-30-20 rule.
The 50-30-20 framework is an allocation model for after-tax income. It establishes a baseline architecture.
Okay, walk us through the numbers.
50% of liquidity is capped for absolute necessities: housing, utilities, baseline nutritional needs, and the mandatory minimum payments on existing debt. This is the survival threshold.
Got it.
30% is allocated for discretionary wants: dining, entertainment, non-essential apparel.
Okay.
And the final 20% is strictly quarantined for wealth building, which includes aggressive debt overpayments, funding the emergency reserve, and investing.
Okay, I have to push back on this. I look at these budgeting frameworks like the 50-30-20 split, and my instinct is that 30% for wants is way too high if you're in an emergency.
It feels counterintuitive.
Yeah. If I have $40,000 in credit card debt suffocating me, allocating 30% of my take-home pay to going to the movies and buying takeout feels borderline negligent.
I hear that a lot.
Shouldn't I compress that wants category down to 5%, eat rice and beans, and throw 35% of the debt to escape the trap as fast as humanly possible?
That instinct is incredibly common. When individuals finally confront the mathematical reality of their debt, the resulting anxiety triggers a fight-or-flight response.
Right.
They attempt to solve the problem through absolute austerity. However, reducing the discretionary allocation to near 0 is the financial equivalent of a severe caloric deficit diet.
A financial crash diet.
Exactly. The human psychological architecture cannot sustain indefinite extreme deprivation.
So you lose the weight in the first month, but your body rebels.
Exactly. When you eliminate all discretionary spending, you isolate yourself from social infrastructure, you remove all mechanisms for stress relief, and you induce a state of chronic decision fatigue.
Every single purchase becomes a high-stakes internal negotiation.
Yes. And eventually, the psychological pressure fractures. You experience a behavioral rubber band effect. You abandon the austerity entirely, binge on discretionary purchases, and usually end up abandoning the debt repayment plan altogether.
Wow.
The 30% allocation for wants is not about indulgence. It is a calculated release valve. It ensures sustainability.
So it's defensive.
Completely. Paying off structural debt is a multi-year marathon. You must engineer joy and flexibility into the system, or the system will collapse.
That is a profound way to look at it. The margin for error is actually a margin for sustainability.
Exactly.
So let's assume the listener implement the system. They use the snowball method to build momentum. They maintain the 50-30-20 balance to avoid burnout. And they start churning through the debt.
The plan is working.
Right. Eventually, they hit the great inflection point. They get a raise at work, or they clear a major loan. And suddenly, they have excess capital in that 20% bucket.
A good problem to have.
Yes. But they face the ultimate financial dilemma. Do I use this extra cash to aggressively pay down my remaining lower interest debt, or do I redirect it into the stock market to start building real wealth?
This is the exact intersection where emotional desire conflicts with mathematical optimization.
Because the desire to be entirely debt-free pushes individuals to liquidate every liability.
Right. However, our analytical sources provide a definitive framework to resolve this tension, commonly referred to as the rule of 6%.
I want to spend some time here because this rule completely redefines how we should view the remaining debt on our balance sheets. How does the benchmark actually work?
The rule of 6% is an arbitrage calculation.
Okay.
It requires you to weigh the guaranteed annualized cost of your debt against the probable annualized return of the equities market over a long-term horizon.
So it's a comparison.
Yes, and the premise is binary. If a debt instrument carries an interest rate exceeding 6%, which encompasses nearly all credit cards, personal loans, and many modern auto loans,
Right.
the mathematically superior directive is to aggressively eliminate that debt before prioritizing taxable investments.
Because the math is absolute. If I pay $1,000 toward a credit card charging 22% interest, I have essentially locked in a guaranteed risk-free 22% return on my money by neutralizing that compounding cost.
Exactly.
And I cannot go into the S&P 500 and find a guaranteed risk-free 22% yield.
It doesn't exist.
The drag of the bad debt will always outpace the growth of the portfolio.
Right.
The math demands execution.
Correct.
But what happens when we cross the threshold?
Well, when the interest rate of the liability falls below 6%, the mathematical imperative reverses.
But this is like mortgages.
Typically, yes. Fixed-rate mortgages, subsidized student loans, or promotional vehicle financing. Historically, a diversified portfolio of equities, particularly when housed within tax-advantaged vehicles, like a 401k or an IRA, has yielded an annualized return of 7 to 10% over multi-decade periods, adjusting for inflation.
So it's a spread.
Precisely.
If my mortgage is locked at 4% and the market average is 8%, I am capturing a 4% spread by not paying off my house early.
You are.
I'm using the bank's cheap money to live in my house while my actual liquid capital is compounding in the market, making me wealthier.
You are leveraging the low cost of capital to maximize your net worth.
It's brilliant.
The opportunity cost of taking $50,000 in cash and applying it to a 4% mortgage is staggering when you calculate what that $50,000 would become over 30 years of compound growth in the market.
By aggressively paying down chip debt, you are effectively robbing your future self of exponential equity.
That's the math.
I understand the spread. The math is undeniable. But I have to say, looking at the psychology of the listener who has fought through the trenches to clear their high-interest debt, the rule of 6% feels like a betrayal of the ultimate goal.
I know. It's tough.
Remember the stat, 84% of people want the American dream of being completely debt-free. Imagine someone who has finally cleared the credit cards and the student loans. All that remains is a 4% mortgage.
They're so close.
Right. The spreadsheet says, stop paying extra, put it in an index fund. But their psychology is screaming at them to pay off the house so they can finally own their life free and clear.
Yeah.
It is emotionally agonizing to hold on to debt when your entire identity for the last 5 years has been built on eradicating it.
You have correctly identified the core tension of generational wealth building.
It's hard.
It is the friction between psychological tranquility and mathematical reality. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the rule of 6% is entirely devoid of emotion. It does not account for the biological stress response of owing an institution hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
It does not factor in the profound psychological safety of knowing that if you lose your job, no one can foreclose on your shelter.
It's the difference between being rich on a piece of paper and feeling safe in your own bed.
Exactly. And this is why the pursuit of wealth is not purely algorithmic. It requires deeply personal calibration.
So what do you advise?
If holding a 4% mortgage induces chronic anxiety that degrades your quality of life, then aggressively paying it off is the correct physiological decision for you, even if it is suboptimal mathematically.
Because you're buying peace of mind.
You are purchasing peace of mind, and peace of mind carries a premium. However, it is vital to acknowledge the trade-off.
You have to own the decision.
Yes. You must consciously accept that by purchasing that immediate psychological relief, you are sacrificing the compounding leverage that is often required to transition from middle-class stability to true multi-generational wealth.
It requires a massive mental pivot. You have to evolve from viewing all debt as a predator to viewing low-interest debt as an employee that you're managing to build your empire.
That's a great metaphor.
But let's follow the timeline.
Yeah.
Let's say the listener navigates the dilemma. They optimize the spread, they maintain the discipline, and eventually the day arrives.
The finish line.
They make the final payment, the balances hit zero. What happens the morning you wake up and the structural weight is completely gone? Because the sources emphasize that the aftermath is actually the most dangerous phase.
Oh, it is the most critical inflection point.
Why?
Because the sudden influx of unallocated cash flow creates an immediate behavioral vacuum. The day after you eliminate a $1,000 a month debt obligation, your liquid cash flow artificially spikes. The overwhelming psychological impulse is to reward the years of austerity.
Treat yourself.
Exactly. This manifests as severe lifestyle creep. The individual upgrades their vehicle, signs a lease on a luxury apartment, or artificially inflates their discretionary spending.
So they just fill the void.
Within a year, the cash flow that was previously trapped by debt is now trapped by elevated lifestyle maintenance.
The chains are gone, but you immediately built a slightly more comfortable cage.
Beautifully said.
So how do we defend against that? How do we take the momentum of the snowball and transition it into actual wealth preservation?
The architecture of wealth preservation requires utilizing the exact same behavioral machinery that achieved the debt freedom.
The discipline doesn't stop.
The discipline cannot relax. It must simply be redirected. The absolute first priority, the non-negotiable directive in the aftermath, is the rapid capitalization of an emergency firewall.
The 3 to 6 month liquid reserve.
Correct. When you are aggressively paying down debt, you operate without a net. Once the high-interest debt is cleared, you must immediately deploy that freed-up cash flow to stockpile 3 to 6 months of baseline living expenses in a highly liquid, accessible vehicle.
Like a high-yield savings account.
Yes.
Because if you don't build the firewall, you are one blown transmission away from tumbling all the way back down the mountain. The emergency fund is the moat that protects the castle of your debt-free status.
It is the only mathematical defense against macroeconomic unpredictability.
Okay, so the moat is built. Then what?
Once the firewall is established, the behavioral muscle you develop to overpay your credit cards is immediately pivoted toward aggressive asset acquisition.
You stay in the game.
You maintain the 50-30-20 framework, but the 20% allocation is no longer defensive. It becomes entirely offensive.
Oh, I like that.
You maximize tax-advantaged retirement accounts, you acquire income-producing real estate, you fund the capitalization of a small business, you transition from neutralizing liabilities to compounding assets.
And this brings us full circle to what that 84% of people are actually seeking.
Freedom.
Right. When you follow this blueprint, when you navigate the hurdles, balance the math with the psychology, and redirect the cash flow, the ultimate prize isn't just a higher net worth on a brokerage statement. The prize is autonomy.
Absolutely.
When your required monthly baseline is stripped of all debt obligations, your required income drops massively.
And the reduction of required income is the definition of economic flexibility.
Yes. So what does this all mean? It means you no longer have to tolerate a toxic work environment just to service a car loan.
Exactly.
It means you have the mathematical capacity to pivot careers, to take a risk on a startup, or to step back and actually spend time with your family without facing immediate financial ruin. Time and flexibility are the true commodities of wealth. That is the modern American dream.
It is the reclamation of your own future output.
To synthesize everything we have deconstructed today, achieving this requires a highly specific operational sequence. You must fundamentally differentiate the strategic leverage of good debt from the toxic drain of bad debt.
Step 1.
You must implement a structural elimination algorithm utilizing the behavioral momentum of the snowball or the mathematical efficiency of the avalanche.
Right.
You must sustain the effort by integrating the 50-30-20 budget framework to prevent psychological burnout. And critically, you must apply the rule of 6% to logically transition from debt elimination to asset compounding.
It is a rigorous blueprint, but it is entirely executable if you understand the mechanics of the environment you are operating within.
Definitely.
Before we conclude, I want to present a final overarching concept to evaluate.
Let's hear it.
We have thoroughly detailed how our current macroeconomic architecture, from point-of-sale financing to central bank rate adjustments, is fundamentally designed to sustain itself through continuous consumer borrowing.
The whole system is built on it.
The system relies on the friction of your debt to generate corporate yield. Therefore, in an economy that requires your perpetual financial obligation to function, is the disciplined mathematical pursuit of a debt-free life actually the ultimate act of modern rebellion?
Oh, wow. You aren't just cleaning up a balance sheet. You are actively opting out of a system designed to extract your labor indefinitely.
It's a revolt.
That is a radically empowering way to look at your budget tomorrow morning. If you found value in this analysis, please ensure you like and subscribe to the Generational Wealth Project so we can continue delivering these critical frameworks directly to you.
It's been a great conversation.
It really has. Thank you for dedicating your time, your focus, and your critical thinking to the project today. We will see you on the next deep dive.